I'll be back. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. It is my pleasure to welcome you to the January 23rd Board of Directors meeting of the Monterey Peninsula Water Management District. This meeting is now called to order. Could I have a roll call, please?
Yes. Mayor Oglesby. Director Paw.
Here.
Director Eisenhart. Director Riley.
Here.
Mark, you're muted.
Yeah, sorry. Director Eisenhart again is here. Thanks.
Got it. Director Edwards.
Here.
Director Anderson.
Here.
Chair Adams.
Here.
We have a quorum of the board.
Thank you very much. And now if you would please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America
and to the republic
for which it stands,
which stands one nation under God,
indivisible,
with liberty and justice
for all. Thank you very much. And now,
And please note that Mayor Oglesby has joined.
thank you. Are there any additions or corrections to the agenda?
There are not, but Exhibit 7 was revised and sent under separate cover to you. So we will not match what's in the pack.
Thank you very much for that. We will discuss that when we come to the item under consent. Is there any member of the public who wishes to comment on anything that is not on today's agenda? And Joelle, I will rely on you to tell me if there are any hands raised.
Sarah, could you screen share the timer? And at this time, I would like to invite Michael Baer. Michael, when you're ready, please present your comment.
(2023) Chair Adams, looking forward to a year of your guidance ahead. So Happy New Year. So the extensive rains have been a mixed blessing. I know there's people that have been flooded, and I've read about what's been going on the Carmel River, and so I really, my heart goes out to all those people that are shoveling mud and maybe living in shelters and redoing their apartments, their houses or whatever. But much needed rain, which needs to get into the ground, so it's into the groundwater, so it's into the aquifers, but also flowing through the Carmel River. And we were supposed to have a three-legged stool, and one of them was ASR. So I know that way beyond what the trout needs. I was really hoping there was a maximum diversion into the Seaside Aquifer for the aquifer storage and recovery. And yet come to find out that 2 of the 4 wells for injection, 2 of them are being used for ejection. Cal-Am is diverting it to be, pulling it out. And so we can't put all the water in during ASR. And that's very distressing. And I've also want to find out if it is true that even though we got 50% of the wells operating, it's less than 50% of capacity. That it's something like 10 to 15 acre feet per day, and we're getting well under 50% of that, and that is so distressing. And I just want to go back to many years ago, they were talking about a three-legged stool, and it was desal plant, and it was Pure Water Monterey, and it was ASR. And now Cal-Am is keeping us from the expanded water purchase agreement. So they are stopping, they're interfering and slowing down Pure Water project, recycled water, which could take care of all of our needs for the next 20 years. And they are also making ASR less effective by their interference of the management there. They are keeping us from injecting the water when we have it from the sky, when God is giving us water. And we're not getting it into the aquifer, into the Seaside Aquifer. And I'm very distressed about that. And part of me wants to say, tell it to an eminent domain judge. It is in the public interest to get Cal-Am. We are in a desperate water situation. Are very fragile. Our water situation is very fragile right now. And Cal-Am doesn't care. They're stopping everything that they can't profit from. So start the eminent domain. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bear. And we have additional hands raised. Is that correct, Joelle?
Yes, Ian Crooks, when you're ready, please present your comment.
Yes, hello, good evening. Ian Crooks with California American Water, Vice President of Engineering. I just wanted to briefly state that we reaffirm our support for the Pure Water Monterey expansion project. We had worked both with both of our partners on the project, and we have a slight difference on opinion in terms of what the CPUC ruled on, but as a company, it's in our best in the best interest that we have an opportunity with our regulator to readdress their decision. And but I just wanted to reaffirm again that we fully support Pure Water Monterey expansion. We're on board with it. We want it. We want the water supply. We also need desal, in our opinion, and so the both are needed. And to the comment that was just made regarding ASR, again, another reason why we need the additional wells that we are requesting as part of the Pure Water Monterey expansion project. We need dedicated wells for extraction, and we need dedicated wells for injection. So that's just goes to show the need for this infrastructure. So we'll conclude my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Crook. And is there another hand raised?
Melody Crislock, when you're ready, please present your comment.
Melody Crislock. Mr. Crooks, no one believes that you support this project. What is the $61.6 million that you were allowed in the decision for, if not for the infrastructure? This is a ridiculous argument on your part. But what I want to address tonight is the situation with LAFCO. Earlier this month, the 12 LAFCO mayors reappointed Salinas Mayor Craig to LAFCO. Mayor Velasquez was recommended to replace Craig. Craig, as you'll remember, was one of the votes against the buyout at LAFCO. For some reason, 4 Peninsula mayors, Potter, Peak, Donaldson, and Carbone, voted to reappoint Craig, voting against their constituents to keep Craig on LAFCO. Craig is now basically the one vote that is blocking LAFCO from bringing this matter back before them and issuing a different decision. Tonight, Craig was gloating at her LAFCO swearing in that the Peninsula mayors had supported her appointment to LAFCO, thereby inferring that these 4 Peninsula mayors support Cal-Am and no longer support their constituents' desire to buy out Cal-Am. It was pretty obnoxious to watch. Anyway, I wanted to say thank you so much to Mayor Oglesby, Mayor Williamson, and Mayor Delgado for opposing Craig on LAFCO and trying to get Mayor Velasquez on that board to replace her. I don't know what happens next, but I'm very disappointed in those 4 Peninsula mayors. I don't know why they're doing this or if they've suddenly switched to Cal-Am's side. Anyway, thank you very much. And I don't understand why. I'd like to hear Cal-Am, Mr. Crooks, I'd like to hear you explain what your $61.6 million is for, if not for infrastructure for the expansion. Was that just, I mean, how do you get away with never mentioning the fact that this money was already allowed you in the agreement? All right, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Crislock. Are there any other hands raised?
Yes, we have 3 hands raised. The number ending in 312. Please unmute yourself by pushing *6, and you may identify yourself for the clerk's record.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Good evening. Margaret Ann Copperall speaking. I would like to know if there is any new information on the CalAm CPUC status pertaining to the water purchase agreement and the CalAm request for a rehearing on the cost recovery amount allowed. Is it this case that CalAm wants an extra $22 or $24 million for infrastructure for its desal project? That seems to be the nature of that request, according to the CPUC Public Advocate's Office, per my understanding. And the reason CalAm cost recovery increase was denied. Could you please clarify? Many thanks, and God bless you all with a happy and fruitful new year. We are so very blessed with this outstanding board and staff. And welcome to Mr. Oglesby for being appointed to the board.
Thank you, Ms. Copperall. Are there any additional hands raised?
Yes, next up, we have Susan Schiavone. Susan, when you're ready, please present your comment.
Thank you. Good evening, board, and happy new year. And congratulations to Mary Adams for becoming chair. And thank you, Karen, for all your hard work. Yes, I just want to echo what Michael Bear was saying about CalAm's latest maneuverings. They do this all the time. They put torture on people. They try to delay. They're now putting things at risk in an even worse way and inhibiting the collection of water that we should have gotten because they've dragged their feet on this project for so long and now refuse to sign the agreement. They need to get off the dime and do it. And I do hope that this will impel the district to push Measure J buyout and that all of this information is brought before an eminent domain judge. And thank you all for your service. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Schiavone.
Next up, we have Tom Rowley. Tom, when you're ready, please present your comment.
Yes, good evening. Tom Raleigh calling. I just wanted to say we're all awaiting the results of Judge Carrie Panetta's decision on the water supply charge, Ordinance 152. Unfortunately, she has 90 days to come out with her decision, which we would hope by the end of February, early March, of course, is the deadline. So hopefully, Mr. Stolt has started to make arrangements for what he's going to do without the $3 million approximate a year for his slush fund. You've had $15 million approximately, slightly more than that, since your surcharge on our water bills was resumed. With the price increases going up, you've gotten more than what was anticipated. So we're looking forward to the judge rendering a decision in accordance with the ordinance. Again, I'm also Vice President, Monterey Peninsula Taxpayers Association. And hopefully some changes are made in your financing situation, and that Mr. Stolt has not, to my knowledge, briefed you in your agenda on what he intends to do if you lose the decision. So anyway, thank you very much for hearing my few comments.
Thank you, Mr. Rowley.
Next up, we have Marley Melton. Marley, when you're ready, please present your comment.
I have a question about CalAm's delay in signing the water purchase agreement. Is this delay meaning that we are not able to do, or that the Water Management District is not able to do as much for aquifer storage as would otherwise be possible during this wonderfully wet year? That's my question. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Ms. Melton.
And Chair Adams, I see no raised hands, so I'll return this back to the board.
Thank you so much. Well done, Joelle. At this point, we're going to close our comments from the public on items not on today's agenda, and move forward with the consent calendar. We have 8 items, but I believe
Chair
we-
Paul, Chair Adams,
Yes.
we have a header before consent calendar, and that's the presentation to
I gone
outgoing.
nuts.
Yes,
Thank you. It was the one thing I was excited about. Well, not really the one thing, but it certainly was something I was very excited about. I apologize so much, especially since I get to go first since I'm the chair. And I have a really just deep gratitude to you, Karen, for the time that you have spent on the items that we cover. When you were chair and I was vice chair, honestly, it was like you were chair and vice chair. I feel like all I did was just tell you, you're doing a great job. And you really, really were. My hope, and you've been very, very generous and kind to me, that you will continue to help and you'll continue to be a resource, because you have just infinite amount of knowledge and experience in the subject. And I think you have just done an excellent job as board chair. And I thank you so much for your time. And I'll see if there are other colleagues who wish to make comments at this point on Karen's.
I would just like to thank you, Mary. I'm not deserving of all this praise, but what I did with a lot of help and collaboration from all the people who are here, and the commitment to help in any way I can is good. You could count on it.
Thank you so much. Are there other members of the board who would like to make a comment on Commissioner Paul's tenure? Yes, Ms. Anderson.
Yes, I will make it quick. I totally agree with Mary, and now I've had 2 chairs to watch and learn from, and Karen, you're the most recent. Listening to you and Chair Edwards has been a great way to ease onto the board and get, understand what's going on. And thank you so much for all your hard work. I saw it and I appreciated it, and I thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Anderson. Is there anyone else who would like to make comment? I see Alvin's hand is up. There it is, old school and the other way. And if you'd like to
you're
unmute
muted,
yourself,
Alvin.
Alvin, please. Oh, not yet.
Yeah,
There we
I'm
go.
off mute. I was trying to learn how to raise my hand
You did.
on this thing, and I was
It's
pushing
one or the
buttons
other.
and talking. But thank you, Chair. Director Paul, I want to appreciate what you did last year. You did a lot. One thing I appreciate is the way we ended the year. We ended with a bang, in my opinion. So I'm glad we carried that on and carried that out. You've been a great chair during the whole year. You made me keep a cool head. So I appreciate everything that you undone. So I hope the next chair, the best of luck too. So here we go.
Thank you so
again.
much. Thank you, Alvin. George Riley has his hand up.
Yeah, I have 2 dimensions to this, Karen. First of all, the year with you in the lead just was a comforting experience for me. Things were taken care of, things were addressed, the agendas were well run at our meetings. I mean, but the 2 things I wanted to say is that I think you explore what's within the box of whatever the issue is, and bring a real mental challenge to the rest of us about where your brain goes, because it's interesting, it's relevant, and it's worth discussing. I hope you continue to do that. Also, I think you come from outside the box, which adds even more dimension to what it is the discussion's going on. It's been a real pleasure to work with you this past 2 years, or a few years. And anyway, I look forward to the next round, Mary. Thank you.
Thanks so much, George. Mark Eisenhart.
Thanks, Chair Adams. Well, Karen, you've been the chair for all of 1 meeting while I was the director. But you know what else? You among others on the board have been a mentor along the way that got me to be here in Division 3. And I just want to say thank you. And I did certainly have plenty of opportunities to sit in on meetings before last month and watch the way you operate, and it is smooth, and you are good. And thank you so much.
I look forward to working with you this coming year.
Thank you. Well, Karen, you have heard several people talking about the wonders of your ability and your dedication to service, and you have really just been superb. I'm very, very thankful to call you both a colleague and a friend, and I look forward to deepening both of them. I would ask Joelle if there's anything that you want to pick up and show on the screen at this point. There we go. Thank you.
Oh, a gavel. I get a gavel.
Sterling silver, I'm sure.
Like it.
And we will get that to you in exchange for Bitcoin. It's a virtual flag.
Well said. Karen, do
It'll
you
be
have any,
valuable someday.
do you have any additional comments you'd like to make, Karen, before we move on?
Just that I am glad to do it because this is a worthy, this is what we're all dedicated to, what we're all doing to manage the water and protect the environment and manage it in the public interest. It's worth it. It's worth it. We're all here because it's important and it's worth doing. And so I really am glad to be doing it, and I'm glad to be doing it with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Karen. Thank you. Amy?
Yeah, just quickly, I would like to welcome Mayor Oglesby to his first meeting with us. I haven't seen him before, sitting in here. So welcome to the pack.
Thank you for saying that, Amy. My bad for not having acknowledged that beforehand. It's nice to work with you again, Ian. We sat on a board together for, 9 years. It was always enjoyable. Okay.
If I could quickly, through the chair, I just want to say, glad to be here, excited to be here, look forward to working with everybody. You guys do wonderful work and look to be part of it. So thank you so much.
Thank you all. Okay, a lot of mutual admiration going on around here today. Enough to move us into the consent calendar. As I indicated, we have 8 items, but there's one item that I believe we will pull for a separate vote, and that's item number 7. Is there any other board member that wishes to pull any item from the consent calendar for today? Seeing no hands raised, is there any member of the public that wishes to pull anything from the consent calendar today?
Chair Adams, I see no raised hands, so I'll return this back to the board.
Thank you very much. With that, could I have a motion to approve the consent calendar absent item number 7?
I so move.
Thank you. We have a motion by Karen Paul and a second by Amy Anderson. Could we please have a roll call vote?
Director Oglesby,
Aye.
Director Edwards,
Yes.
Director Riley,
Aye.
Director Eisenhart,
Aye.
Director Paul,
Yes.
Vice Chair Anderson,
Yes.
Chair Adams.
Aye.
The motion
you
is
very much.
adopted.
Thank you very much. And now we will go to item number 7, which is to ratify the board committee assignments for calendar year 2023. And I apologize. I think I was the one that slowed things up, that kept the information from being sent to you in a far more timely fashion. Is it possible, Joelle, for us to share the screen to show the current committee appointments? There we go. I'm just going to ask you to please review the committee appointments. And if any member of the board has a comment they wish to make, we'll take that, and then we'll go to the public and see if there's any other member of the public that wishes to comment on item number 7 in our consent calendar.
I have one question.
Yeah.
What's shown on the screen, is that the same, is that similar to the document that we got separately?
Yes.
Did you? Yes, I think
it's the same. Okay, thank you.
Okay, are there any questions or comments from the board on these appointments to the committee assignments today? Yes, Amy.
I have one. I seem to have 5 committee positions and 2 alternates. And I'd be happy to give one up to somebody who's looking for one.
Is there one
There's
that
anybody.
you're trying to pawn off on anyone? And is there anyone willing to accept it?
I'll take it. I'll take, which one you want to give up?
Oh, Alvin.
Yes.
How about the Water Supply Project Governance Committee?
Oh, yeah, I'll take that because we won't have a meeting on that. we never have a meeting.
That's the
I'll
wrong
take that one. You don't have to worry about that one. You can do that one because you're not going to have a meeting.
So I believe that we will take that and we will probably have a separate motion on it to approve this change. Is there any other change that one wishes to make here? Not seeing any hands raised from the board members. So at this point, we're simply talking about the change in the Exhibit 7A. So is there any member of the public that wishes to comment on this change on our Exhibit 7A?
Chair Adams, I see no raised hands, so return this
Okay.
back to the board.
Thank you. Could we have a motion then to approve the change in item 7A?
I move approval of the change.
Thank you.
I'll second
Thank you very
it.
much. Okay. Do we have a roll call vote, please, Joelle?
All right. Director Oglesby,
Aye.
Director Riley,
Aye.
Director Edwards,
Aye.
Director Eisenhart,
Aye.
Director Paul,
Yes.
Vice Chair Anderson,
Yes.
Chair Adams.
Aye.
The motion is adopted.
Thank you. And I'm probably going overboard with all of these motions. But I just want to be sure Dave Laredo doesn't look at me because I've made some error here. So now we will go back and we're in the consent calendar. And I will see if it's if I can get a motion to approve item number 7 on the consent calendar.
I so move.
Thank you.
I'll second it.
Thank you. So we have a motion by Amy Anderson, second by Alvin Edwards. Could we please have a roll call vote?
Director Riley,
Aye.
Director Eisenhart,
Aye.
Director Paul,
Yes.
Director Oglesby,
Aye.
Director Edwards,
Aye.
Vice Chair Anderson,
Yes.
Chair Adams.
Aye.
The
Thank you
motion
very
is
much.
adopted.
Thank you. And that closes, we will now close the consent calendar and go to the general manager's report for a status on the California American Water compliance with State Water Resources Control Board Order 2016-0016 and the Seaside Groundwater Basin adjudication decision.
Thank you,
General
Madam Chair.
Manager.
Thank you very much. I'm going to screen share here. Can we all see the
Yes.
presentation? And this will go relatively quickly. The Monterey Peninsula Water Resource System has now undergone 3 months of the water year, so 1 quarter. And these are very early results of actual versus target. On the river itself, significantly below target in terms of withdrawals from the river. And on the Seaside Basin in general, fairly close to expectation, but significantly under target. When I say close to expectation, the Laguna Seca, because it's at 0 for target, every month will build its deficit. But I believe the rains have reduced outdoor irrigation that might otherwise have occurred in these months, and therefore amounts are down from what might have been expected. On the specific other projects, ASR recovery is 0. We are in injection. We'll talk about that later. Pure Water Monterey recovery has exceeded the target. And that's because deliveries have also exceeded expectations. We're about 17 or 18 acre feet more withdrawn from Pure Water Monterey than was injected in the same 3 months. But there was a little bit of a residual balance that carried over from September into October of the water year. Good news is you see table 13 water rights have been posted. These are very rain dependent and seasonal in nature. It's a December to May water right. So that's a good positive, which means that the other Carmel River water right gets to be avoid taking a little bit. And then Sand City decel, you can see 56 acre feet, which is a good sign, even without its new source well. So things are looking good on all those projects. And then demand for customer service after 3 months, we're 60 acre feet ahead of the same time last year. You know, I suspect that'll hold through January because January was very wet, as you've experienced. And it was much drier last year. And in fact, in February, it was a very dry February last year. So it's a little bit too early to tell on all of these. On rainfall, you can see this is through December because this is our January meeting, but we've already lived 20 days of January, and we know that, you know, ultimately, see if I can, there we go. You know, ultimately, we've already had about 12 inches in January, so we would exceed this 10 inches on the map, I mean, on the chart. And you can see that here, the cumulative is the red and the individual days are the blue. So you can see all of those days of rain in January, and our total now is, you know, about 20, just over 23 total inches year to date. This is where the rainfall, this dotted yellow line through current, ranks relative to the 100-year of historical data that we have at the San Clemente rain gauge. So the wettest year on record was 1998. Driest year on record was 1924. Through January, even with no more rain for the remainder of the month, we will have exceeded the highest rainfall total ever through January. If there were to be no more rain today, we would end up in the above normal category for the entire year. And because there is rain in the forecast approximately 10 days to 2 weeks out, and we don't know what's going to happen in February, March, April, it's highly likely that we'll end up in either the wet or the extremely wet zone. And it may be that we won't catch up to 98 because they had an amazing February in that particular rainy year. But as I said, we're already exceeding all of the rainfall that we received for 100 years to date as measured at the San Clemente gauge. And on flow, this is a fictional bar. John Lear just put in an estimate of what it might look like for January because stream flow truly lags the rainfall. And so it took first to kind of refill the aquifer, saturate the soil. But this is kind of what we think we'll see in January, but it'll be firmed up when we have our February meeting. And then finally, ASR injection, the yellow bars are daily injection, and the blue is the cumulative injection. And we'll come back to this during the next topic on water supply. But recall we had a very good week early on before Christmas. But then the stream flow criteria fell away because obviously, as I mentioned before, you have to saturate the ground and fill up the aquifer to maintain the stream flow at the Highway 1 gauge in order to meet the in-stream flow requirements. And that concludes the GM report on compliance.
Thank you so much for that, Mr. Stoltz. Is there any member of the board that wishes to ask questions or make comments on this item at this time? I'm not seeing any hands raised. Joelle, we'll go out and see if there's any member of the public that wishes to comment or ask questions on this item today.
Sarah, could you screen share the timer? And at this time, I would like to invite Michael Bear. Michael, when you're ready, please present your comment.
Thank you for that. We rarely get to comment after the report, and maybe it was an error, but I just want to reiterate my question. I was looking at that last chart. It did appear that, there was scales on both sides of that chart. And you did mention you're going to be talking about ASR later, so it might just be premature, but very curious how the ASR injection relates to full capacity, if it were possible, and sort of what's going on with it in more detail. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chair Adams, I see no raised hands, so I'll return this back to the board.
Thank you very much. And we will now go back to our general manager for item number 10, an update on the water supply projects.
Excellent. So let me also screen share again. And tonight's focus is just going to be on the ASR project because that seems to be on everyone's mind. And I just lost it there. There we go. So this is an overview of the CalAm service area geographically, just to give you kind of a sense. I know some people are more graphical in nature. The Carmel River, let's get a pointer again. Carmel River.
Thanks, Dave.
Is down this corridor. The hole in the donut is Tehama and Montara and Jack's Peak. And then you have your regular Pebble Beach, Pacific Grove, Monterey, Seaside, Sand City, and Carmel. So that's just a brief overview of geography. As a system, and there's not enough detail on here to really see anything, but the blue are the distribution systems in each of the cities. And then there are also a myriad of tanks and pump stations along the way, and then wells along the Carmel River. So the little blue are the wells, a little yellow T is a tank, and a little square pink P is a pump station. And I just wanted to show those to you. ASR is located up there at the far corner of the north of our system. Actually, all of its facilities are actually outside of the system. The Monterey Pipeline was added, came online in 2018, and runs basically from the Yardley pump station in Pacific Grove to the Hilby Avenue tanks and pump station over here. There is a new pump station at Forest Lake, which will assist in moving water north to south. A new pump station right off of Rancho San Carlos Road, which will assist in moving water up the valley. My understanding is that these two pump stations have not been energized by PG&E yet, so can't move that water all the way up here as it will shortly. And then finally, a couple of key things. There's a Segunda tank, which is a very sizable at 2 tanks, I believe, which has enough head to push water strongly back into the Carmel Valley and the Carmel Valley Village area. And then finally, what's called the Crest tank, which is very much at the top of the hill, right at the entrance to the Tehama Country Club, kind of hidden underground. You can't really see it, but water placed in that tank can flow by gravity down through Montara and into the ASR facilities. This was kind of simplified in a presentation done by CalAm in August of 2019. But it was, the graphic is representative of where we are today, pre-desal with Pure Water Monterey during the period of year where there would be ASR injection or standby. And what's noteworthy here is they show that water could flow both up and down the Carmel Valley down around the point or up and over Tehama and Montera and into ASR. And I want to keep in mind that that was envisioned, but that's not exactly what's going on. So at this point, ASR well number 3 is being utilized as an extraction well and of pure water Monterey water that has been placed in the ground. And so to produce that water and send it into the system, they actually need to run against this arrow, which if we hadn't put in the parallel pipeline that CalAm completed last year, we wouldn't be able to both inject and produce along here this 1.3 mile segment. So the parallel pipeline was added so you can go this direction to inject ASR and go this direction to withdraw pure water Monterey water. But contrary to how this was envisioned when CalAm put this graphic together, the pure water Monterey pipeline, the Monterey pipeline is being utilized for that production of pure water Monterey water going this way through Old Monterey, New Monterey, and into PG to the Yardley pump station. So that pipeline is not available as drawn in this map for injection to ASR during these very productive winter months. So instead of having access for injection to that large diameter pipeline, we're using the smaller diameter pipeline, the Segunda pipeline, through the crest tank and then down the hill. So there are, what I just pointed out, are a couple of system constraints, but there's several different system constraints on ASR injection. So our permits themselves, if maxed out, would get us about 29 acre feet per day. So that's kind of the starting point. Now we have 4 injection wells, and some of them have aged and can inject less. Some of them proved to be better than expected and can inject more. But generally speaking, we think of those 4 wells maximum injection capacity really at 26 acre feet per day. So right off the top, we've lost 10% of capacity if all 4 wells were available with the Monterey pipeline serving all 4 of those wells. When the Monterey pipeline is not available, as I explained, currently it is not, and we can only use the smaller diameter Segunda pipeline, that potential for 26 acre feet per day is cut to 19 acre feet per day. Now, about 3 years ago, 2.5, 3 years ago, we allowed the Ryan Ranch and Bishop systems to move from their own wells, which were failing and provided both a capacity and treatment challenge, to connect to the CalAm main system. And it is served primarily with water that goes through the Segunda pipeline. And so we've given up about an acre foot per day. And at some point in the future, when Hidden Hills is connected, if, as has been discussed, CalAm decides to not interconnect Hidden Hills way up in the hills of Carmel Valley, but instead down near their existing well off the end of this pipeline, then there might be another acre foot per day or 2/3 of an acre foot per day that would be lost availability in the winter months from the Segunda pipeline. So we gave up a little bit there with that interconnection. What happens though is the 4 wells that we have, ASR3 is being used for extraction of pure water Monterey water. Now it was identified in late 2017, early 2018, that even without pure water Monterey expansion, CalAm needs additional extraction capacity in the north part of its system. And that hasn't been built yet. It's been planned for, but it has not successfully been built. And so in order to grab the pure water Monterey water, we've been in a mode where CalAm has been using ASR3, a well owned by CalAm, to produce that pure water Monterey water. And because it's plumbed in coordination with ASR well number 4, we can't bypass well number 3 and go use well number 4 for injection. And so we really only have 2 injection wells while we're stuck in this mode of production from ASR 3. Now, luckily, that doesn't cut everything in half. It gets us to about a maximum rate of 13 acre-feet per day if everything's working pretty well. Now, one of the things we discovered during the flooding is that John Lear and the team was doing a very good job, about 2,900 gallons per minute, which is almost that full 13 acre-feet per day. I believe it was a Saturday, January 7th, that the call came in that there was concern over the level in the Segunda tank. And the only way to maintain those levels is to fill it from either Carmel Valley wells that are operating or pushing water up the hill from those 2 new pump stations, which unfortunately were not yet energized, so couldn't do that. So we were only dependent on Carmel Valley wells. When the flood came, that presented both a safety risk from leaving the wells plugged in, as well as the health risk from flooding the wells and sucking in raw river water laden with mud and what have you. So Cal-Am necessarily, as a safety precaution, began to turn off wells in the Carmel Valley, especially the upper Carmel Valley area that was subject to flooding. And as a result, we were requested to turn down the ASR injection so as to better maintain tank levels. And then you can't turn those wells back on until they pass some water quality testing. You know, basically when you flood a well, you can't turn it back on until you can purge it. And if your backflush pipe is still inundated with water, so even though the well may be outside of the water levels of flood, the backflush pipe may still be inundated. So you have to wait for the waters to further recede. And then once they've receded and you blow the well off and you test the well, you need to ensure that there's no traces of bacteria on a recurring basis. And so it took a while for many of those tests to allow the wells to get turned back on. So we went through a period of time where the combination of not having injection capacity, not having pipeline capacity, turning wells off for safety reasons, you know, brought us down to the 4 to 4.5 acre-feet per day. When you add all of those up, you're operating at about 16% of your maximum capacity instead of 100%. Now we know 10% comes right off the top, even if we had all of the parts that we wanted. So really, this 84% is more like 74%. So here's where you can see what's been going on. The orange solid line is the current year injection. So here was the early December storm that gave us about 4.5 days, and then nothing for quite some time, and then the rain started again, you know, basically New Year's Eve. The blue solid line is 2017. The dashed line is where we could be, recognizing we don't have all 4 wells available to us, but if we could maximize the injection rate at that 13 acre-feet per day. Now I can tell you in the last 2 days, they've gotten back to 10 and 11 acre-feet per day. So we are on the mend, but you know, it's a series of all of these different constraints coming home to roost. And even here you can see what had happened is this period of time in 2017, same type of thing. Wells were turned off. We didn't have access, so there was no more injection going on. Started to rain. Chair Adams is right. Earlier today, she mentioned to me that Paso Hondo flooded on the exact same day in 2017. It looks like the waters crept under Gary Brandt's garage door a day earlier in 2017 based on news accounts, but basically it was the same overnight event. And so then things slowed down a little bit while wells were being brought back online. And then you can see that the slope in the remaining part of 2017 is steeper, or in other words, higher than the slope if we were able to max out at the injection of about 13 acre-feet per day. And that's because the folks at Cal-Am at that time, different director of operations, different field people, went out of their way to get as much as they could off the production wells, but we also didn't have the same constraints on the injection side. So they would get more water and enabled 3 wells at times to be used, and even 4 wells to be available for injection. And so that particular year, they could capture more water at a higher rate and inject it, and finish the entire year with 2,345 acre-feet injected, which historically is the highest year ever. So this is the best we can do. We're not there yet. So you would take this sloped line and reconnect it here. And so we'd be heading along in this direction if we get back to that, which is where we're trying to go. We're putting out our ASR report daily. It's a combined coordinated team, Cal-Am and district staff. And they are in constant communication about what can be done to get back to the maximum injection capacity. But we're never going to see a 2017 year until there's more extraction capacity other than ASR wells added to the system. And it would be far more productive if the Monterey pipeline was available for at least some of the months in a very wet to extremely wet year. But that's something that's going to have to be thought through by the company on, how they plan to operate their system. But as I said, this graphic back in 2019, talking about a 2020-21 year, envisioned availability of the Monterey pipeline for injection during the ASR season. So there's some things to learn going forward. This is the history, and I think it's important because there are folks out there who are casual observers who like to take long-term averages and say, well, this is how the system works. And it's not really true. We didn't even have all of our permits until the water year 2009, or I should say our first permit. And when that happened, we only had 1 well available. We had 2 wells available in 2010, but we didn't get to 4 wells until 2015. And the second set of permits that expanded the maximum that could be taken from the river wasn't applicable until all 4 wells were available. So we had a period of time. I talked about 2017. That was a very, very good year. 2019 was the first year that we had fully available the Monterey pipeline and all 4 wells, and we did pretty well. We exceeded kind of the long-term average expectation from the project. We got into modes where not all wells were available in 21 or 22, but it didn't matter. These were dry years, and there wasn't really a whole lot of injection taking place. And then here we are waiting to be determined what happens. But there's really nothing that can be concluded about the operation of the system by looking at these long-term averages, because we really just got to a point where, well, let me back up a little bit. All through this period, up until about 2021, the regulators didn't even allow ASR to be operated in the manner it was designed. And by that, I mean, it's designed to build up a reservoir as if behind a dam, but instead it's in the ground. And so in very wet years and normal years, there is a full expectation that your available water to inject is going to exceed the long-term average. You put it in when it's wet and you take it out when it's dry. And it's been shown through a bunch of different modeling and use of the historical hydrologic data that the long-term average is roughly 1,300 acre-feet. It was designed for 1,920 acre-feet as an expected design capacity, but we use 1,300 as an average. And I've seen enough data that says that it's clearly somewhere between 1,200 and 1,350. So it's not a bad average. But as I said, they wanted during this period, any water that got put in during the winter was deemed to must come out in the same summer of the same water year, under the theory that if you banked it, you'd be relying on the Carmel River in the summer, and that would be unfair to the environment, to the steelhead and the vegetation, because you would be saving water that could otherwise be used to offset river withdrawals. So that was the whole operating philosophy. But once Pure Water Monterey came online in 2020, it became clear that we were starting to produce so much water in the north part of the system, more than could actually be taken out and utilized. So in 2022, now that the river right is down to its legal minimum, we do have water banked. There was water banked from ASR that hadn't been touched for 3 years because they had so much water that had to come out of the ground in the Seaside Basin. And so a lot of our hobbyists or laymen out there who are trying to look at this data and make a determination of how reliable it's going to be in drought simply don't realize that it's only been since Pure Water Monterey came online that it can now be thought of as a storage system and start to achieve that long-term average. But unfortunately, as I said, we started out in 2 dry years. So we really started ourselves off on the wrong foot to make a significant impact on building up storage. Now this year is going to reverse that curse. So I look at it, so my favorite Christmas movie is White Christmas, and they have a scene in there, and they're doing choreography. And I guess what I'm trying to get across is ASR really is simply choreography. You have to have all the constraints addressed and out of the way. You have to have no flooding. You need to have your pump stations energized. You need your wells turned on. And we've just had a series of unfortunate events, some predictable, some not predictable, that have conspired to make it hard to maximize aquifer storage and recovery. And what, it gives us food for thought as to how can we maximize it going forward, get the most we can for the remainder of this year, realizing that there's a couple of major constraints that will limit how much we can do, but then trying to get back to how it was originally envisioned, how it was originally sold to the Public Utilities Commission, and how it has been portrayed to the community, and try to get back in next winter and the winter after that and so forth, trying to maximize a little bit more. As of today, we're over 200 acre-feet stored so far. I think even without new rain, we've got probably a 4 or 5, maybe even 6-week continuing window for injection because of the flows in the river. And we're expecting a little more rain. So if you get a couple inches of rain every few weeks, we might be injecting all the way into May, which would be outstanding. The key takeaways: we're not getting everything we can. We need to do better. But for the little old lady who told one of our fisheries service staff, "Oh, if only there was a way to capture some of this rain," and Corey Hamilton said, "Well, ma'am, we do. let me tell you how. We do, but there's no pipe big enough to capture everything that you saw going down the Carmel River or the Salinas River 2 weeks ago. And, we will continue to do the best we can, but I think there's definite room for improvement.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for that really comprehensive and very, very interesting report today. Is there any board member that wants to ask a couple of questions or comment on this today? Yes, I think I see people are fluttering their fingers. That looks like Alvin, Karen, and then George.
Excuse me, General Manager. We've been hearing about additional wells. Cal-Am came on here tonight talking about additional wells. Do we need the 2 additional wells that they are arguing about at the PUC? That's one of my questions. And is that bypass, $8 million bypass that they put in and said it's gonna work one way, now it's working another way? What can we do about that? We sell it to the public that is more, and we need it. Now they on there hollering about, well, we need additional wells. Do we need those additional wells?
Yeah, so there's 2 parts of your question, and the first one is yes, the wells are needed. The request in the pure water expansion was for 4 new extraction wells. When we designed it and when we developed the supplemental environmental impact report, it was recognized, it was recognized in late 2017 and early 2018 when the Public Utilities Commission had asked the question, can you get more out of Pure Water Monterey? Maybe we don't need a desal plant. That was the nature of their question. And it was shown that, yeah, with the expansion, you could get 2,250 acre feet. And it was thought that only 2 new extraction wells would be needed for the expansion. But at the same time, the task force, or the team of folks from Monterey One Water, our district, and Cal-Am, and frankly, it's Cal-Am, said, well, we could definitely use 1 more extraction well just for the system we have, and frankly, a redundant well, so that we could move more water from the north to the south based on just simply the addition of Pure Water Monterey. If we had those wells at that time, then you'd still be able to use ASR 3 and 4 for injection. But those wells were tied to the expansion. So there were 4 wells scoped out in the expansion. Then, as you know, the SEIR got held up through some pretty interesting politics. And then it finally got cleared, but the 4 wells remained with the expansion project instead of, it could have been bifurcated at some point where a couple of wells could have been taken out and thrown into the general rate case or something, but it didn't happen. And so the wells timing, yes, was an issue. The parallel pipeline, as I pointed out, if Cal-Am is going to produce Pure Water Monterey water in the winter months, then you need some way to move water in both directions. So we'd be getting nothing if we did not have that parallel pipeline. That graphic I showed you that envisioned a world where during ASR injection season, the Monterey pipeline would be reversed, and all of the testimony to the PUC that said it could be reversed in the winter months to optimize ASR. I don't have enough information to tell you what the system constraints are that require Cal-Am to pump Pure Water Monterey water in these winter months, but it's not a complete system yet without those 2 pump stations I mentioned earlier being able to move water up the hill. So, I don't have a good answer for you on, could you not have needed the parallel pipeline if the Monterey pipeline could have been used in a south to north direction in the winter months? Could the system have been fully served by only the Monterey pipeline moving ASR water in the winter months. I don't know. And there's, that's a conversation for another day with CalAm, but they know their operating constraints, and they know where the water comes from. And this seems to be a decision that they've made, that you need to produce in the winter while also injecting in the winter. But it does have its consequences.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, Mary, you're muted.
Karen and then George.
So I'm trying to keep in my head all of the constraints that you mentioned, which is, I think, more than half a dozen, and wondering how long it will take to fix each one of them. And it's too much for me to keep in my head. But so let me just ask about a couple of pieces. It seems that one of the problems is a significant delay in building extraction wells that are needed, right? So that's so getting those extraction wells built, that will help alleviate one of the constraints. Is that right?
Correct.
Yeah, and that may take, we don't know. I mean, now that's dependent on the expansion moving forward, correct?
Right, because they are part of the same application. Yeah.
Right. Although you made a good point that they didn't have to be tied to the expansion. The system needs them anyway. All right. What is holding up? So moving on to a different constraint, the power, the pumps and the not being energized. What's holding that up, and when can that be fixed? How long will that take? Do we know?
I don't know, but I do know that trying to get it done when there were the storms, it's the same PG&E energized, doing the final connection. And so their crews were completely unavailable. Could it have been scheduled earlier? It all just depends on what that construction scheduling was. But that's the final step, is to hook them up, flip the switch, and then they're operable. But PG&E has been so distracted, as you can well imagine, with all the downed trees and outages.
So, but PG&E, we can hope that PG&E will get to this.
Oh yeah,
in the next few months.
That's something I'll have to follow up on for you. I don't know what the schedule is, other than CalAm clearly was trying to get PG&E to come out and do it, and they're just overwhelmed. The other wells that were shut down, they are coming back online, and as I mentioned, we got up to 10 and 11 acre feet per day the last 2 days over the weekend. So I think that's a positive, as long as we don't hit flood stage again and have CalAm turning wells off. You don't want a well to short out, underwater and create a safety risk. So, I mean, that was very well reasoned, but we'd love to see everything come back online as quickly as possible. But then you have the water quality testing issue, and you can't talk a well into cleaning itself.
Right. Well, I just want to thank you, Dave, for laying this out for us. It's a lot of information, but it's important that we understand, and the public that is trying to follow this also have that information. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. George.
Dave, early in your report, I think you made a reference to the choices. You speak of choreography, but I'm curious about some choices maybe that were made. I think you said that you had the ability, the CalAm had the ability, or the system had the ability to push more ASR water into the basin, but that CalAm made the choice to provide water for production as opposed to injection. And I'm wondering what was the basis for that? Have I got that right? I mean, and it's a choice, not necessarily a system constraint of any kind. And then did I explain that right, or have I got the right perspective on it?
No, you do. You have it right. But you know, the system is not one cohesive system. You know, I can't remember the number, but I think it's got like 29 different pressure zones, or you know, subzones that you if you want. And I remember 3 years ago or so, as we were looking at the numbers as to could, you know, how much supply was really needed to meet demand. And it was, you know, it's a game where you add up all the available supply and then you look at demand and you say, well, is it enough? But the missing piece to that was, well, can you actually move the water from where it's located to where the demand is? And that's where pump stations come into play and things like that. And so we, as the district, do not have enough knowledge of these, you know, pressure zone constraints, moving water from where it is to where it's needed. And it's also seasonal. You know, in a perfect world, one would imagine that, and it's been talked about, if Cal-Am wanted to minimize its river withdrawals in the summer in order to enhance habitat, then you could take more of the river water right in the winter, and maybe you could serve part of Seaside and part of Old Monterey with moving river water north, while at the same time jumping on all of that ASR water and using the Monterey pipeline to inject and bank the pure water Monterey water for a couple of months in the winter, and then start using pure water Monterey water, and then going back to just the Segunda pipeline. And you know what it is? It's a spreadsheet that has to be put on somebody's computer, and I'm sure there probably is one inside Cal-Am. And I can't tell you if there's fluff in the system or not. If they're running it this year this way, but they've got greater choice next year once pump stations are online, or you know, what would happen if Pure Water Monterey comes online in 2 years or 2.5 years at this pace? You know, we're just not privy to all of the operating constraints internal to Cal-Am's system, but that is a lot of it. You know, when you look at how in 2016 and that phase of the PUC application, how the Monterey pipeline was explained. It was repeatedly explained in testimony that it was going to maximize winter ASR operations. And that is not the case.
I just want to make the point that the investment in ASR is a huge investment for very limited access to water. And it's got to be overbuilt in order to maximize the take when the water is available. So you've got a huge investment. And in order to make it pay off, it seems to me, and I'm not trying to pay it off necessarily my brain, but in order to make it worthwhile, it's got to maximize its take from the river when it's available. And I'm just maybe the system constraints got in the way here, and I'm just not sure. And I don't even want to pursue that question, but I do want to make a statement that I think the priority ought to be take the water when you can get it, and not necessarily use demand as a priority over getting the water. And I don't know how that message can be transmitted, and maybe there's no message other than just my comments today. And you know, I know some Cal-Am people are on the line, but it seems like the priority ought to be maximize the water that you can get when you have access to it. That also means you're using the infrastructure to its maximum capability when it's opportune to do so, and to fall back on a production reason for not maximizing the ASR water. That is not a Hobson's choice in my mind. That's a clear distinction of priorities that should not be there.
Well,
my opinion.
I'm gonna challenge you a little bit. That, you know, our world of provision of water, customer is always first. You know, you want to deliver, so you have to produce enough water to deliver to customers. And the unknown in this situation is there another way to do it in the winter months so that you can maximize injection and still meet that customer demand? And that's, and I think that that's really what you were saying, but you never want to maximize your supply at the expense of a customer not having water come out his tap. So.
Fair enough, Dave. Fair enough.
Thank you. Mark.
Thank you, Chair Adams. General Manager Stoll, I want to follow up though with Director Riley's comments in general, and especially about what you said, what I was hearing you say about these pressure points, and earlier during your presentation that you can't really know for sure, looking over the shoulder of Cal-Am, if the operational decisions are necessary. I mean, that's what I heard in my mind. Another way of saying it is, what I heard in my mind is, we're on the outside looking in on this. And in terms of these critical wintertime operational decisions, and frankly, either at the time or even in hindsight, the operational decisions here during the wet months may be absolutely the only decision, the Hobson choice decision. And of course, you know, we don't want anybody not to get water. How can we know? How could it be? Is there any way we're not on the outside looking in on these fairly technical, if not very technical, operational pressure points, as you call them, decisions? In other words, just to put it bluntly, not how do we know? We know we don't know. How can we know?
How can we know
that the operational pressure point decisions were and are uniformly the only ones available to Cal-Am at the risk of ASR injection? That's my question.
That's a perfect question, because, you know, at the feet on the ground level, our team and Cal-Am's team are consummate professionals, great exchange of information. But I know, you know, right now, Chris Cook, Ian Crooks, Josh Stratton, even the associate from Latham and Watkins, who are in our audience today, are probably rolling their eyes, going, well, you know, how much did the district just explain correctly? How much does the district not know? How much should they educate us so that we know more? And those are pretty high level policy, you know, system policy issues, but they're the right folks to get us those answers. So I think, you know, if we can, that's a future conversation to see, is this a just this year problem? Is it going to go forward? There was a data request. It was actually a Marina Coast Water District data request during this last proceeding that said, you seem to be operating in this direction where the Monterey Pipeline's not going to be used to deliver injection water. When will that change? And the answer to the question was not in the foreseeable future. So there isn't, you know, there's no answer. So those are the kinds of things you're absolutely right. We need to figure out how to get answers so that we can learn which ones can be addressed. I mean, as I said, I go back to that chart, 2019, August of 2019, wasn't that long ago. So what was envisioned then that can't happen now?
Well,
and we don't have an answer, right?
And if I'm just the luxury of a comment in response to your answer, and then I'll leave it there and return it back. It just seems to me that if the pressure point, as you call them, I'm sure there's a better way to describe it, but the difficult operational decisions that are being made on I suppose, a daily basis about Monterey pipeline and what we're doing in the wet winter months, if they're the correct decisions, and in fact the only decisions, it just seems to me that it would benefit Cal-Am to have more transparency on that, because we would understand it more. That's all. I just want to leave it there.
Thank you for those comments, Mark. I don't see any other board hands raised, so I'll go out to the public, and I think we have 2 participants with their hands raised, if I'm correct, Joelle?
We now have
Three
3.
now. Okay, we'll start with Kevin Dayton, and then Tom Rowley, and then Michael Bear.
Kevin,
Kevin,
when you're
you're on.
ready,
Thank you,
please
Joel.
present your comment.
Thanks. Kevin Dayton here, and I am speaking tonight as a hobbyist amateur ratepayer. And I know Mr. Stolt mentioned the White Christmas scene. They're doing choreography. And for those of you who've seen it, you might remember that it starts by saying, the theater, what happened to the theater? And I'm just astonished by all this. I think the theater is right here. First, I want to thank Mr. Stolt for his presentation, and also thank you to the district to your prompt response to my Public Records Act request last week about ASR. Great immediate response to the valuable documents, and I'm reading through them and learning a lot about that. I'm thinking that there was a goal once to end the cease and desist order with the so-called 3-legged stool of Pure Water Monterey, desalination, and ASR. And my theory about what's happened is there's been so much fighting over Pure Water Monterey during desalination that everybody forgot about the ASR. This sort of presentation you had tonight probably should have been going on routinely for the past several years, so that when the very wet year happened, or hopefully this will be an extremely wet year, you could have the water. And I have to say, as a hobbyist and amateur, I had assumed foolishly that we were at the point where if there was an extremely wet year, we'd magically reach our 5,326 acre feet per year in permit 0808. But now I find out that this is not really the case. So it's a good time for the public to learn about this. Hopefully the news media is following this too. And you know what? I know some people are blaming Calium for this. And I find it a little frustrating that it's hard to find out what's going on with the system and why all these wells were not built or decisions were made and what all the delays were. But also, I think that in the future, this particular board needs to be much more vigilant in following ASR and saying, how do we maximize all these systems so that we can get that cease and desist order off? Sometimes I look at all this and I say, you know what is a secret plot behind all this just to keep that cease and desist order forever? So I think the board should regularly get updates on ASR, and this should be explained a lot more. I'd like to see more detail too on the status of the ASR wells and what the plan is to get all of them operating in the way they're supposed to be. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. And next, I believe we have Tom Rowley.
Tom, when you're ready, please present your comment.
Sorry, unmute. Good evening again. Tom Rowley, Vice President of Monterey Peninsula Taxpayers Association. This is ASR is something that our organization has been following for a long time. Unfortunately, my key expert that I had, Jack Jensen, former CEO, Fleet Numerical Meteorological and Oceanographic Center, passed away about 3.5 years ago. He had studied all of the data on rainfall and the potential for ASR. Clearly, what has been advertised by your organization, and I address this to all you directors, you've been authorizing, repeatedly putting out to the media 1,300 acre feet a year. General Manager Stolt clearly showed you a graph when low rainfall years, and my old friend Jack Jensen, he said 7 out of 10 years are going to be relatively dry years. That's below the 18 to 20 inches that we would normally expect in an average year. Whether we're going to start getting with, so-called climate change, we're going to get more rainfall each year, but that was his consensus. That was his observation on studying what were the dry years. So it was clear that 1,300 acre feet of ASR per year was not produced in the past. And from what was described tonight, it probably won't be produced in the future unless we have several consecutive years of high rainfall. So the thing is, I think you directors, before you put advertising out that says it's 1,300 acre feet a year. That needs to be corrected. It needs to be corrected immediately because you have not made it at 1,300 acre feet since day one, since the system was put into operation. So I think George Riley's comments were right on. It's very frustrating, but I think you directors need to understand 7 of 10 years are dry years. You can't manufacture more rainfall, and you're not going to be able to inject water that is not, quote, excess flows from the Carmel River. So thank you for allowing me to comment. Thanks.
Thank you, Tom. Next, we have Michael Bear and then Chris Cook. Michael? Michael Bear?
Michael?
Yeah, sorry, I didn't hit unmute. Thank you, Mr. Stolt, for that comprehensive report, which really, gave some history and some perspective that I've been curious about for many years. I'd like to answer Mr. Eisenhart's, Director Eisenhart's question. One possible way to make sure that you're not on the outside looking in is to buy Cal-Am. This is another excellent argument for why you need to get to eminent domain as soon as possible. Despite people blaming the water district, Mr. Stolt was very clear. We're on the outside looking in. We have sort of one hand or part of one hand tied behind our backs. We don't know the decisions that are being made. And it seems very clear to me that if Cal-Am was out of the picture already, and the district had the opportunity to look at the whole system, to know where the pressure points are, to know all about the system, these sorts of decisions would have been anticipated years ago. You would have prioritized injection in the winter. You would have said extraction needs to come from Carmel River in the winter. It's a pretty obvious call to do that. We need to get that water. And then the Monterey pipeline should hopefully be bi-directional. In the summertime, if you need to move it north to south, you can. But in the wintertime, you should prioritize excess rainfall to maximize ASR. The other thing I want to comment on, I'm looking at that slide from 2017 and showing that, and how we'll never get to as good as 2017. 2017 was before the Monterey pipeline was completed. Okay, the old funky system produced more ASR water than $50 million later, which was a major reason. It had, ASR, it was sold as ASR, but also as a transmission line for the desal plant. And so there's $50 million to get something that's less efficient. And yes, ASR is part of it. I understand that it's complicated. And I just think if Cal-Am wasn't there and therefore you guys knew it all and could talk to Pure One Monterey, that you guys are so much, I'm just sorry, you're just so much smarter than them. I have a lot more faith in you than them. And you would have anticipated this. And we wouldn't be talking about this and, oh, now we need to, build 2 more wells and all these. It just would have, it wouldn't happen that way because you would know all the information, you'd make a better circuit. So I got 12 seconds, right? It says I got 12 seconds. And I'd just like to say, please go buy them out. Get to work on it. Thank you. Make an offer.
Thank you very much, Michael. Next, we have Chris Cook and then Melody Chrislock. Chris?
Hello, thank you for letting me speak this evening. Chris Cook, Director of Operations with California American Water. Just kind of giving a high-level summary here. The diagram that was referenced with the flows of the Monterey pipeline, that showed 2020, 2021, so approximately 1,500 acre feet more that could be pulled from the Carmel River, and different assumptions on where we'd be with water supply at the time. So we do, with now being down to the 3376, need to maximize as much water as we can from the seaside area. And I think, as Dave mentioned, the parallel pipeline, that is one that is being used right now. And without that, we we would be looking at something where we could not inject this season. So the fact that we are able to inject is because of that parallel pipeline that the board approved. And in that we talked about needing to be able to send that water to the Monterey pipeline as part of that presentation. So that is a critical component that's being maximized right now to keep the pumping from the river within that 3376. With the rains that have happened, it's definitely one that it's great to see rains and have the breach of the river and ASR injection. But I think we also see here that what you want is rains, and ideally consistent rains, but a significant flood event is not something that helps operations. You have well sites that can get flooded, you have power that goes down, you have water quality issues. It's not as simple as a dam where the water just flows in and fills up, unfortunately. So, or fortunately, since we are, in an environment where removal of dams helps the environment. But with the more electrical, mechanical, water quality oriented ASR, we have had operators out there in the middle of storms putting in generators. We have operators getting sampling over the weekends, coordinating, all day with DDW to see if we can get the water quality results that we need. We've been doing also with the new wells. We've been looking at, how can we further maximize the system? We're looking at putting in 2 new wells in Carmel Valley area, and I think as Mr. Crooks said before, Ian Crooks said before, with additional extraction wells in General Jim Moore, that will be our biggest constraint, is getting more injection wells in General Jim Moore to get above that 13 acre feet, certainly in the near term. So definitely trying to do what we can at a emergency event and maximize what's able to while prioritizing getting clean, safe water to the community. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Chris. And now we have Melody Chrislock.
Melody Chrislock, Public Water Now. So this project, the ASR project, is jointly operated by MPWMD and CalAm, right? So isn't there any legal recourse that you have to actually get real answers on what's going on CalAm's side? Why is the Monterey pipeline, as Michael pointed out, $50 million of ratepayer money not being used as advertised? It would seem like you do have some kind of leverage here. I mean, it's a joint project, and I know CalAm may not want to be forthcoming, but don't they have to be? The other thing I was going to point out to Tom Raleigh, that if he just looks at the last 5-year average for the ASR project, even with all the restrictions on it right now, it's over 1,000 acre feet, the last 5-year average, just add it up. So he's wrong, just didn't bother to look at the math, I guess. And Kevin Dayton, I'm wondering, you think that CalAm's not to blame here and that somehow the Water Management District forgot about this? Well, how could CalAm forget about one leg of its 3-legged stool? Why wasn't it ready for this? Why is CalAm not ready for a rain event like this? I mean, that's a huge question, and it just is not, I'm sorry, the answer is not satisfactory. Thank you.
Thank you, Melody. I'm seeing no more hands raised.
That's correct. Actually, we have one hand raised. Marley Melton. Marley, when you're ready, please present your comment.
Well, sorry to raise my hand at the last minute, but I just happen to think that it seems to me that the incentive of a for-profit water system is to reduce costs and maximize profits. And I agree that nobody could fully anticipate the extent of this flood, but a similar flood has happened before. So it would make sense not to do that. Also, I'm concerned that we not end up in a crisis situation for lack of adequate storage, where it would be so bad that someone would argue successfully for dropping all those conditions on the desal plan and just rushing ahead. I think that must be avoided. And anything that increases the likelihood of a crisis where we don't have enough water stored is definitely against the public interest, and that we need to make every effort to both provide adequate water now and store adequate water for the future, and that it is possible to store adequate water for the future. But let's make sure that happens. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Marley. And we have another hand, and that's Susan Schiavone.
Hi, I'm more or less have a question, but I think it's along the lines. I just want to understand that right now, CalAM's depending on production, sounds like from Pure Water Monterey during the winter. And we have all this water coming in, and we're not able to do ASR because those 2 wells are being used as extraction wells for production water. So my question is should this expansion agreement be signed and they build the other wells, this could be resolved, and then you would open up the other ASR wells for more collection during the winter? I'm not sure if I understand that well, but it seems to me so wasteful not to be able to collect extra water when it's coming off, and it's kind of free water if I understand. That we would not want to collect that so that we could restore the Seaside Basin as part of what's going on with this whole water thing, rather than putting water in and then taking water out and not pursuing that banking of water that is so important. So I'm just wanting to understand that should this PE, this expansion of Pure Water Monterey be completed, that would start to resolve some of this in the wintertime and help make the ASR what it was supposed to be. So that's my question. And I also have to say that CalAM has many professionals at its disposal and can certainly figure out this system to have it maximize what is correct. And I know they want to get off the river, but doing it a different way would probably be the best approach, and finding a way to accommodate times when there's lots of water should be part of that planning. And my final comment is that this all just points again to all of the reasons why our public water agency needs to buy out CalAM, and we have a general wonderful public water agency that will be addressing all of these issues for the community. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, I see no more hands raised, so I'm going to close public comment on this item at this
I just
point.
wanted to clarify what they were saying.
Okay, I think you need to mute yourself, Susan. I'll go back to where we were. We were going to close public comment on this. And Mr. Stolt is next up, but I'll see if you'd like to make any final comments on this, Dave.
I'm not going to address every public comment, but I do have one I want you to be left with understanding. So bear with me here. I showed you this chart earlier. Remember this one?
Yes.
So what this is showing you, and let's get our laser pointer going.
George will be happy.
So this is 100 years worth of rainfall sorted by year. 25% of all of those 100 years, or 25 years, fall within this range. And, you know, I don't know just off the top of my head, but it looks like it's 17 inches to 22 inches. So that's 25%. Each of these remaining categories is 12.5%. So when you have somebody saying 7 out of 10 years are 9 inches or less, that would be in here. No, it is not 70% of the time. It's less than 12.5% of the time for a 100-year cycle of rainfalls. Just as it's 12.5% of the time that it's rained over 31 inches. So this is a distribution of all 100 years on record. And so when you hear things like 7 out of 10 are going to be dry years, that's simply not the case. And so when all of the numbers that support an average of 1,300 acre feet per year come from this distribution. And so, and it was mentioned that the last 5-year average, well, 2 out of the last 6 years operated at greater than 1,300 acre feet. 2017 was 2,345 and 2019 was 1,335. And the whole idea is when it's wet, you put it in the ground and you store it. That year that you get 2,400 and you only take out 300, I'm sorry, 1,300 is 1,100 that you didn't take out, that you've left behind. And so that's the way it is designed to work. But we haven't had an operating history where it's been allowed to work that way. So anyway, I just wanted to give you a better understanding that the data is distributed and then you look at it on a stochastic basis, a probabilistic basis. And there is no probability of 7 out of 10 years being 9 inches or less.
Thank you. Karen.
Thank you, Mary. I have to make a comment about a piece of this discussion has been our inability to figure out why CalAm makes certain decisions about what infrastructure to invest in and when, and why they make various operational decisions. And I'm also mindful that Dave Stolt has told us many times that relations between our operational staff and CalAm's operational staff, the working relationship is very good. And that, you put those two things together, and I wonder whether if it were CalAm's operational staff, the people in charge of actually running the system, operating the system, were making the decisions, maybe they would be different decisions, and maybe they would be much better decisions. The problem is they don't get to make the decisions, the operational people. This reminds me very much of the situation with PG&E gas system, where for years and years and years, the gas engineers and gas maintenance staff were telling the company, we are not doing what we need to do for inspection and maintenance in order to maintain the gas transmission system safely. One year, they even demonstrated at a shareholder meeting of PG&E to try to get the company's attention to say, we need to do things differently to keep this gas system safe. But of course, they weren't listened to. And then one day, pipeline blows up and kills a bunch of people. And it's just that the people in the field knew how to inspect and maintain the system, but they weren't making the decisions. And that's what this situation reminds me of. And it could be different. It could be different. That the people with the technical know-how might make different decisions from the people in New Jersey.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you. I think with that, we're going to close this part of Mr. Stoltz's presentation. Let him at least catch a breath before we ask him if he wants to report on the legislative outreach for calendar year 2022.
I'm not going to report much. The attachment shows what we were up to mostly. Going forward for this year, our emphasis is going to be on protecting the $4.8 million allocation or earmark in the governor's budget for the Pure Water Monterey expansion injection well number 6. And on December 15th, I think the Senate finally approved the National Defense Act, and inside that act was a section for the Water Resources Development Act renewal that includes $20 million for Monterey Peninsula water and wastewater. And so it's all under Section 219 of the Army Corps of Engineer program. So we'll be focusing on getting together the jurisdictions here that may have stormwater capture or other small scale water projects. We've got some other pertinent features that could benefit both Pure Water Monterey expansion, as well as the Castroville Seawater Intrusion Project. But the district intends to be the lead for that WRDA money. Again, it's 20 million. And it's an outside chance we may be able to get some of those projects approved as earmarks in the current fiscal year budget, but we're going to have to get really smart on the program by April. Otherwise, we'll be looking at fiscal year 23-24 for pulling down money. But it's a new source. Monterey One Water got an earmark, a small earmark last cycle through an EPA program. We attempted to get an earmark for fish passage through a NOAA, National Marine Fisheries Service program. So this 20 million of WRDA is just another program against which earmarks can be made. And we'll be having the San Francisco region of the Army Corps of Engineers. We'll start setting up meetings with them in February, we hope. But anyway, that'll be the focus. It's 20 million of opportunity, and we would sure hate to waste it. So over the next 12 to 18 months, we'll try to come up with a program to go get it.
Thank you.
That concludes all of my reports.
That's great. And I know we're all thankful to Senator Laird and Congressman Panetta for their efforts on our behalf to get the funds that we have so desperately needed. Okay, let's go ahead and moving forward. We've been at this for a while. George?
I just want to tell Dave, the general manager, that I had warned him ahead of time that I was going to ask him several questions. I'm not going to ask them because of the time. I will do that offline. Thank you.
Thank you. That's very kind and thoughtful of you. Poor Ian has been sitting at this desk since 4 o'clock this afternoon at meetings. So I think both of us are kind of at the end of our ropes here, but not before we hear a report from our district council.
Thank you. Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board, and I'd like to welcome aboard Mayor Oglesby, and we look forward to working with you. Tonight's general council report is going to be a bit different than has been in the past. The board and at the direction of Chair Adams has asked that I provide a little more in-depth litigation status report, because these are matters that are affecting and are of great interest to members of the public. There was no closed session this evening. Joelle, if you could put up the first slide. The next one. Thank you. I'm going to be reporting on 4 different arenas in which litigation has been very active. December and this month in January, we've had an extraordinarily active engagement on these matters. The first is matters before the Public Utilities Commission. We know that CalAm applied for permission to enter into the water purchase agreement for the Pure Water expansion. That was done at the behest of the district. The district filed a complaint with the PUC alleging that CalAm was failing to operate a legally adequate water system. And the resolution of that complaint was that CalAm was directed to file this application. The hearing on the application resulted in a decision that was issued by the Public Utilities Commission on December 4th, and it granted permission to CalAm to sign the water purchase agreement for the Pure Water expansion and to purchase 2,250 acre feet of additional water from the Pure Water expansion. 2 days after that, CalAm's president, Kevin Tilden, on December 6th, wrote to all 5 members of the Public Utilities Commission indicating that CalAm was not going to sign the amended water purchase agreement. CalAm's rationale was that it needed approval for 100% of CalAm's revenue and rate-making requests, And without approval of 100% of their requests, they would not be able to enter into the water purchase agreement. The district thereupon filed a petition for modification with the PUC. We were asked that CalAm not only be granted permission to execute the water purchase agreement, but that the decision be amended to compel CalAm to sign that water purchase agreement. The PUC processes allowed for other parties to offer responses, and responses to the our petition for modification were received by January 17th. We asked the commission for an opportunity to reply to those comments, and that was granted. And so we will have an opportunity to reply to comments by this Friday, January 27th. In another aspect of this same case, CalAm filed an application for rehearing. That application was filed on December 30th, the last day possible. The PUC rules allow a request for rehearing only if there is legal error in the decision. It is our perception that CalAm did not cite to legal error, that is merely arguing facts that were already before the commission. CalAm has asked for oral argument on its request for rehearing, and those written responses to CalAm's application were also due on January 17th. CalAm's application for rehearing does reaffirm that supplemental water provided by the pure water expansion is very much needed. But again, CalAm has made the assertion that it has been prevented from signing the water purchase agreement by the terms of the order. It's our belief that CalAm's application is nothing more than dissatisfaction with the Public Utilities Commission's conclusions. CalAm merely wants more money. And my sense is CalAm's elevating their own corporate interest above the interests of its water consumers. CalAm is asserting the decision has a negative impact on CalAm, but I think it's only because they're getting less profit than they could have. CalAm does admit, acknowledge by way of its application, that future rate-making adjustments can be made in the general rate case processes, and accordingly, CalAm has no basis to claim that the decision causes permanent fiscal impact to CalAm. It is our belief that CalAm can both sign the water purchase agreement and proceed with that path, and at the same time, make every case that it can for maximizing its profit through the rate-making process. That concludes my comment on this matter. I don't know if you want to take questions, Madam Chair, on case by case, or I can keep on going.
You know, I think in light of time, we should keep on going. I just want to make a quick comment, though, that I really appreciate your doing it this way, Dave. I sometimes feel that the public does not really have a clear understanding of exactly where we stand, and this is certainly one way of making sure that the public knows. So thank you, and if you'd like to continue, that would be terrific.
Thank you. Then we'll go to our next slide, Joel. In another arena is, of course, the actions before the California Coastal Commission with respect to CalAm's proposed desal project. The 4 agencies did bring suit against the Coastal Commission, and CalAm is the real party interest challenging the issuance of the coastal development permit. Those 4 entities are City of Marina, this water management district, the Marina Coast Water District, and Marina Coast Water District Groundwater Sustainability Agency. The 4 agencies did collaborate on filing a petition for writ of mandate and complaint for declaratory and injunctive relief. That was filed by January 5th of this year. The complaint alleges Coastal Act violations, CEQA noncompliance, and due process violations in terms of how the Coastal Commission hearings were undertaken. The next steps in this will be the lodging of the certified administrative record. That due date is the 6th of March. The matter has been served and filed, and it is up to the Coastal Commission and CalAm to file formal responses. You can go to the next matter. In another arena, as I said, we had a very full December. This is the district's lawsuit against LAFCO. There was a hearing on the demur that was filed by LAFCO and by CalAm. A demur basically says, even though you filed this action, there's no reason that the court should hear it, that this should be dismissed. On December 9th, Judge Wills did dismiss one of the claims that had been brought, the claim that there was impermissible bias by LAFCO commissioners. The judge found that LAFCO's action was quasi-legislative, and for a quasi-legislative action, bias is permissible and is not disabling. So on that claim, the district's assertions were not allowed to go forward. But Judge Wills did allow the claim that LAFCO itself had abused its discretion. It was our assertion that LAFCO needed to consider the interests of the public as a whole and not the impacts on appointing authorities. And the judge did not sustain the demur on those grounds, and therefore that is an issue that's going to go to trial. In sum, the judge's ruling allows the district's challenges to proceed. Earlier, the judge had allowed CalAm to intervene in the case, but the judge also set very stringent conditions upon CalAm's actions in intervention. The judge commented on December 9th that CalAm appeared to exceed the conditions that had been set in the intervention order. The judge set an order to show cause hearing for CalAm to identify how it could or should have complied with those conditions. That order to show cause hearing will be held on March 10th. And one of the consequences at that time could dismiss CalAm's complaint in intervention. It would not dismiss LAFCO's defense of the matter. That would still stand. The judge did set a trial date on the merits of the writ petition, and that will be held on August 7th of this year before Judge Wills in Department 15. We can go to the next slide. The last arena is are the two cases brought by the Monterey Peninsula Taxpayers Association. These are actually cases number 2 and number 3. An earlier case had been resolved in the favor of the district. These are two different legal theories that challenge the district's collection of its water supply charge as enacted by Ordinance 152. As Mr. Raleigh did comment earlier during oral communications, there was a hearing on December 20th in Monterey Peninsula Taxpayers Association 2. Judge Panetta did hear argument and then took the case under submission. The only date that is known at this point is that there is a future case management conference set for April 4th in Department 14 before Judge Panetta. And the related case, which tracks along on an alternate theory as to why the water supply charge should be discontinued, also had its case management conference continued to April 4th. So at this point, we don't know how the judge may be ruling, and we don't know when that ruling will be made available. By practice, the ruling needs to be made within 90 days of the December 20th hearing date. Although that's by practice, I'm aware of circumstances where judges can take longer than that. So I think the only operative date that we have is the April 4th case management conference. And until that time, it's anyone's guess as to when a decision will be rendered. Thank you. That concludes my comments on the status report.
Thank you. I appreciate it very much, and I appreciate that we were able to have it in open session rather than in a closed session. I am hesitant to get into a lot of discussion about this because of the lack of time, but George, I know you've got your hand up, and if it's a quick comment, I would appreciate it that way.
I just wondered if Dave could give a quick explanation of what reverse validation is.
Yes, a validation action is the opportunity for the public agency to bring a question before the court so the court can validate that what was done was appropriate. Reverse validation is the opportunity for somebody else to bring those same contentions forth to say that the actions taken by the public agent were not accurate. If you're a betting man at the craps table, there's the come and the don't come line. It's just looking the opposite version of the same view.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And again, thank you. I very much appreciate this report, and I think it was illuminating for all of us, and my expectation is for the public as well. With that, we're going to go to now our own director's reports, including the AB 1234 reports that need to be reported on trips, conference attendance, and meetings. Any oral reports from any board members on things of interest or important items for the rest of us to hear? I've got two that I'll mention. I think most of you know that there were three new board appointments to the Monterey County Board of Supervisors appointments to LAFCO. And we now have Supervisor Wendy Rudascu and Supervisor Glenn Church are now representatives on LAFCO, and I am their alternate. In addition to that, Supervisor Rudascu is going to stay on her committee as the primary member of the Seaside Ground Water Master, and I will come in as the alternate for the Water Master. So I just wanted people to know that. I see our counsel has his hand raised.
Yes, if I may, I just wanted to announce to members of the board that my office will be conducting two training sessions, one this Thursday on the 26th. That's compliant with AB 1234. That's Brown Act and ethics requirements. And the following Thursday on the 2nd of February, Groundhog's Day, we'll be conducting a Zoom presentation on AB 1825, that's sexual harassment prevention. So if anybody has an interest of joining us, please, you can call Joelle, you can call my office, and we'll make sure that you have the login information.
Thank you. I also wanted to make a comment, since it is water related, is that there is a special center that has been sent up in Spreckles at the Veterans Administration room over at Hall in Spreckles for people who have suffered damage from the floods. It's a one-stop shopping where you can go in and have bring your, all you have to do is have an ID and the comments of what it is you have sustained, and they will be able to help you go through all of the processes. The Small Business Association is also there to be helpful with Small Business Association loans for anyone who has suffered loss due to the floods. Anyone else who wishes to make comments on anything? Yes, Mr. Edwards.
Thank you, Chair. Just want to let you know, went down to Seaside City Council, their first meeting of the year, and gave them a water update. Welcome aboard, Mayor Oglesby. You're going to cut my trips down because you can help me out by following up since we're on the same board. Welcome aboard. Another one, I listened to Monterey Warm Water Recycle Water Committee meeting, and they talking the same thing. We're talking about CalAm and the water purchase agreement over there. They want to get it moving just as fast as we want to get it moving. Also, listening to the LAFCO special meeting they had today. I was glad to see our supervisor and Mayor Oglesby on there, on the board, and it seemed like they know what's going on, so they recused themselves from their closed session. I was glad to see that. Both of them recused themselves from that closed session over there because they were talking about us. So I hate for a conflict of interest to come up. I know people are looking for any way to stop that one, but I'm glad they recused themselves. Also would like to ask the general manager, can he give us an update on Measure J on those things, those items that we had going forward with them for the last 6 months or 5 months, and see where we at? Since people are still asking about it, let's get an update. And next month, I hope we can clarify the steps that we are using to move forward on that. And thank you, Chair, for the time.
Yes. And so we will, I see our general manager is furiously taking notes. So my expectation is that we will have an update on that at our next, at our February meeting. Okay, I don't see any additional hands raised for any additional information for the director's reports, including AB 1234. So with that, we will close that item and continue to move forward. We now have 2 scheduled matters, action items that we will need to take a motion on this evening. And we'll turn to Director Stoltz if you're ready for this.
I am.
Okay, item 14.
Yeah,
and 15.
Yeah, so the district did sustain damage during the flooding. In addition to our rescuing chickens and ringing doorbells for evacuation and generally being a good neighbor, we also had to muck out a building and deal with some other things. So Larry Hampson and Thomas Christensen are available. Which one of you two is taking the lead on this?
Who's got the chickens?
I think the first slides are on Sleepy Hollow, if Joel wants to put that up. Okay, it's a really long title for this item, but essentially we're asking for funds, emergency funds, to deal with the damages that occurred recently at both Sleepy Hollow and at the weir near the Carmel Area Wastewater District. So I'm going to do a few slides first, and then Thomas will come in with the damage downriver. So next slide, please. So you're not seeing double here. This was supposed to show both the river flow at Robles del Rio and the river flow at Highway 1 or near Highway 1. Thomas will be showing you the river flow near Highway 1. So the USGS went out and actually got a stream flow measurement at near the peak and gauged it at 11,400 cubic feet per second. They give that rating a poor, or they give the measurement a poor rating because of the difficult conditions. I'm sure that John's crew would have liked to go out to Sleepy Hollow and measure at Sleepy Hollow, but the road was covered with several slides and rockfall, and they couldn't get in. So they did kind of back into what they thought the flow at Sleepy Hollow was, and they came up with an estimate of 10,900 cubic feet per second. So to put that in perspective, just 500 cubic feet per second less than at Carmel Valley Village. To put that into perspective, the design numbers for the Sleepy Hollow facility were for a 50-year flood of 10,200 cubic feet per second and a 100-year flood of 12,100 feet per second. And our hydrologist did say that, with the error of measurement, that flow could have been actually higher than 10,900 cubic feet per second. But based on seeing what we saw in 1995 and 1998, I think, around 11,000 was probably what it was at Sleepy Hollow. So the good news is Sleepy Hollow's mostly survived a relatively large magnitude flood. The bad news is that some things didn't work out so well. So could we have the next slide? So you're looking at the recirculating aquaculture system building off to the left here. And a close-up at the bottom left corner, the debris line came within less than a foot vertically of the top of the building wall during that flood. And this picture was snapped by the contractor for the rearing channel, who drove in through a couple feet of water because he was afraid he had put his equipment too close to the river. And so he moved his equipment away from where he had it stored. So the good news, the system actually worked except for a few hours at the very peak of the flood. The system continued to work. There were fish in the facility. The fish biologists were working furiously to try to get the fish out before the flood came. They managed to tag more than 2,000 fish, and out of about, I think, 9,000 fish that were being raised at the facility. But the flood came a little too soon for them to get all the fish out of the facility. They did get in the next couple of days after the flood and get the fish out. The facility actually stopped working for a few hours. And could we get the next slide? And I'll explain why the facility may have stopped working. Yeah. So that's looking inside the recirculating system building. You can see the high water mark off to the left. That went above a couple of the motors that deliver water to the fish, to the head of the rearing channel. And there was a flood sensor that shut the facility down that got inundated, and actually that flood sensor is toast. We have to replace that. There were a couple of other motors that were inundated, and what we're currently doing is trying to dry those motors out, prevent rust in them. But those motors are going to have to be taken out, taken apart, probably have new bearings. We'll inspect the windings. Hopefully the windings can be salvaged, but we may have to replace both the motors that you see with the two arrows and a couple of other low-lying motors that are not in the picture shot. And if we could go to the next slide. Yeah. So this was why the measuring crew couldn't get in on the morning of the 9th. There were several rock falls and debris flows on the road. And if you look at the picture on the right, the rockfall and debris flow ends almost, or starts almost exactly where the rock fencing had stopped that was placed just a few years ago at a cost of about $1 million that CalAm paid for. The contractor was able to get in, bring in some extra equipment. He's cleared the road. All the rocks are gone. The fallen down material has been moved. But the road's still so wet that the materials trucks that were supposed to be coming in and getting started work on the rearing channel work refused to come in. Four of the Assured aggregate trucks drove in, started slipping on the road and said, okay, no more. We'll wait until the road dries out before we come back. So can we go to the next slide? The intake screen was completely inundated, I think, with sand and silt. You can see there's an air relief valve with a little smiley face on it in kind of the middle left of the picture. That used to be straight up and down. The force of the flow and the debris against it knocked it over. We don't know what's happened to the intake screen. We do know that it stopped pulling in water for about 18 hours, and we had to reduce flow to the rearing channel. And then all of a sudden it started working again. So what we think happened is the brushes on the screen eventually managed to drill down through the silt and sand and clean off a portion of the intake screen. We hope there's no damage to it, and we hope it functioned just exactly the way it's designed. We just don't know. And we won't be able to tell until the water clears up and drops a bit more. And if we could have the next slide. So the road repair and debris removal probably going to run about $45,000. Could be up to $75,000 to repair or replace the two large motors that pump reuse water out of the RAS building, and then another $10,000 for the two small high pressure motors for the drum screens, for $130,000 total. We think that this is tops on the repairs. We hope that it's going to be a lot less. But until we get these motors into shops and get them torn apart and see what the damage is, we don't really know exactly how much it's going to cost. And I think, Thomas, you're probably up next with some slides of the weir.
Larry,
Oh,
are those eligible for FEMA?
That's a great question. In the past, the district has been successful in similar floods in 1995 and 1998 when the president and governor declared emergencies. So hopefully we can get at least partial reimbursements for that. We just don't know yet. Simona is working on that now, seeing what's required for applications with FEMA and OES.
Thank you.
All right, Joelle, this is Thomas. I'm hoping for the next slide. So this is an update to the damage to the Carmel River Resistance Board weir. It's kind of a fancy name for a steelhead counting station. It's kind of like a fence-like structure that kind of brings adult steelhead as they're coming into the system into a trap so they can be counted and tagged. It is part of the rescue and rearing management plan. It's a requirement that we count to the best of our abilities incoming adults, and this is the method that we have been using the last couple of years. It's an integral part of understanding steelhead recovery in the Carmel River. It takes about 2 days to install it and 2 days to remove it with a minimum of 4 people. And it is usually in the river from January 1st through mid-April. We've used it in 2021 and 2022 and experienced some relatively moderate flows in the 1,200 cubic feet per second range. Next slide, please. So here you can see ideal conditions for steelhead, the counting station, the weir, and you can see the trap on the left picture there, and then that fence-like structure is what prevents them from skirting around the trap. And it's designed to pass debris and logs and higher flows when it passes over it. There's an adult steelhead that is being measured and tagged on its way upstream from the ocean, and soon to be released after it was measured, and then it works its way upstream. Next slide, please. So the series of storms that came over the last few weeks really stair-stepped up the river, which made it really impossible to remove the weir before the highest of flows came. The weir is usually installed when the river's pretty low at about 50 to 100 CFS. We got up to roughly 8,500 based on the gauging data at the site. And so by the time we saw the forecast for the big storms, the river was already flowing pretty strongly, and it was impossible to remove those panels because you have to fight the current, unhook it from a cable, and it requires people to be in the water. Next slide, please. Here's a picture of the peak of the flow. The weir is under these turbulence on January 9th. This is looking downstream. It's about 8 feet underwater here, roughly, during the time of this picture. Next picture, please, or slide. So the trap was damaged significantly. We actually found a portion of it on the north arm of the lagoon in the sand. You can see that some of the welding had been cracked and broken. Those horizontal bars missing in the center had actually been broken out by the force of the river. One, it's possible that it was hit by a floating tree or a log, or it was just so much force as it was tumbling that it broke apart. Next slide, please. We did get a visual inspection of the weir a little bit today. The river's still pretty high. There is a portion of the fence panels that are still there, but the box trap has been severely damaged. They said that they could use that front part that we found and repair that. So a brand new box trap is $15,000. And then the bulkhead panel, we think one of those might be missing, is $2,000. And then we put in a placeholder for some additional panels if some of the ones are damaged. There would be $800 for delivery, and then possible assistance from Fish Bio to help rebuild the rail cable, which all this structure is connected to. The trap is actually cabled into the sediments as well, and those cables actually broke, unfortunately, because of the high flow. So we're looking at a estimated total of basically $28,000 if all of these items are necessary. It's possible that some of these panels are not necessary, but I know that the box trap, for the most part, is a cost that we know we have to carry forward. Next slide, please. So the recommendation, based on the information that Larry's provided and a lot of the unknowns still, is to give the general manager some leeway to contract with folks to do emergency repairs. When we wrote the staff note, we selected $250,000. It's a portion of the flood and drought reserve, which is a total of $328,944. So it's not the entire drought reserve. I don't think we're going to get to that value because there is, a differential there between Larry's estimate combined with mine. I think our total is around $157,000 that we have spec'd out on the paper here, but that could change depending on what we find out at Sleepy Hollow or the weir. Initially, we thought we had lost the entire weir, but it seems like there's a portion of it still there. So that is the request. And then I don't think there's any other slides after that. We could maybe see if that's the case.
That is the case.
Okay.
Thank you. Thanks very much. The pictures really speak 1,000 words, don't they? It's just really, really amazing, the strength and power of the river. It's just really something. So, Mr. General Manager, I understand that we have, I think I've got it broken into two different actions that need a motion. Is that correct?
That is correct. This motion would be to authorize emergency spending from the flood drought reserve. I heard it referred to as the drought reserve, but we might as well use the flood part of its name on this one. Up to $250,000, not knowing really any of the hard estimates, but these repairs need to get started in order to gain function of the two discussed units. We also had some emergency repair out at ASR on well number 4 for a lubrication line, which very likely would also be lumped in under this. It was a crew of about 1 day's worth of activity. But nevertheless, it would just be to authorize emergency spending without a firm budget, not to exceed $250,000.
And would we be adding in a request to also explore reimbursement from FEMA and California Office of Emergency Services or any other sources?
That's going to be the next item.
Next one. Okay, great. Okay, so then going backwards, would anyone like to make a motion to approve staff recommendation to approve the expenditures for repair of flood damage at the Sleepy Hollow Steelhead Rearing Facility and the Carmel River Resistance Board Weir?
Director Adams, can I ask a question?
Yes, Mark.
I'm sorry, very briefly. I was just comparing some of the numbers between the action item and the slide presentation, and it does look as though by a factor of 2 or 3 or 4, depending on which area we're talking about, Weir or that there's quite an overestimate, and I certainly understand the cushion, Dave. But do you see that? Is it likely that we would have this fairly large cushion that ends up not getting used? I mean, do you have a sense?
Yeah, that's our hope. I think on the Sleepy Hollow fish rearing facility, steelhead rearing facility, the condition of the intake, which is still underwater and hasn't been fully assessed, is the big contingency potential. And then the fish weir, it's always going to be the less expensive of the two, but I think when we started first looking at this, we thought more parts were lost. But yeah, the hope is to not spend that money. That I don't want to come back and say we're at 250 and now we need to keep going. You know, Thomas did mention that the balance, the budgeted balance of the beginning of year balance in that particular reserve was roughly $329,000. But the goal would be to try to hold all of the contracts to the minimum and then not use up the authorization.
Sure. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Director. Chair.
Through the chair, right fast. Are we going to try to get that weir going the rest of this winter, or because I heard one person was out there trying to remove it. I'll read in here. It takes 4 to do it. Now we're going to put that back in. We got to be able to take it out in time before the floods come. You know, I don't care if we miss a few days or whatever, but if we get it in there again, I hate to lose another one, and you come back and talk about putting another one in. So,
yeah. The really issue with the issue with the weir, the whole goal is to have it in place when the lagoon is open to the ocean, so that there's the superhighway to spawning upriver has opened. And so that's why they typically get out there January 1st, or roughly before the lagoon is expected to breach or is breached mechanically. And then you want to be there through the spawning season so you can catch these adults and trap them and wave a wand on them to see if they've been tagged before, and if not, tag them. But to your point, it's really hard to anticipate a flood event and get it out or secure. And I don't think, to be honest, we didn't know that the design was such that the force would break the cables and float it off, downstream. So I think there's a little bit of some learning that took place. But yeah, understand your point. I mean, wisdom being a better part of valor if we knew that there was going to be a flood event. And we do. I mean, we watch gauges and we know what's going on. So if we can next time, maybe we will at least remediate some of it. The interesting thing is its design is supposed to freely pass debris, or a stand-up paddleboard or a kayak or anything over the top. It's one of those that kind of catches you one way going up, but provides relief going the other way going down. And so it would have been nice to have a camera to figure out what really took it out, but we don't know. But we're going to face the same kinds of peril because the season of use is going to be the rainy season.
Well, I hope we get some better tie downs or whatever, and really look at it again. If we had to spend a little bit more money, I don't mind, as long as that thing would not get tore up like that. And we had the people out there to get it out. That's all I have on it.
Okay, Any other quick questions? I'm still seeking a motion to approve staff recommendation. So
I'll
it
make a
looks like
motion.
Mark Eichenhart is making the motion. Is there a second?
I'll
John Paul is a second. So we have Eisenhart and Paul. Could we please have a roll call vote?
Director Riley,
Aye.
Director Paul, Director Oglesby,
Aye.
Director Eisenhart,
Aye, and I look forward to finding out what the final costs are.
Director Edwards,
Aye.
going back to Director Paul,
Yes.
Vice Chair Anderson,
Yes.
Chair Adams.
Aye.
The motion is adopted.
Thank you very much. And then we'll go on to item 15.
Why is it always Division 3 directors that want to know the budget for everything and then look at the check requests? And all right, this item is so Simona Mosbacher from our staff has been out in front talking to the California Office of Emergency Services. This staff note and this whole packet was put together before the Thursday trip by FEMA, which added Monterey County to the FEMA list. So we weren't even a FEMA eligible until the helicopter set down at Watsonville Airport, I think, so, or sometime that afternoon. So this particular request is to adopt a resolution appointing the agent for interacting with Cal OES to seek reimbursement for some of the damage that you've seen. And so the starting point is they require a resolution of the board, and that's all this is. The version that you saw in the packet is their version. Chances are we will be reformatting it to a traditional district version, but the content will be the same.
Okay. Could we have I guess I better start asking for public comment on these items. Any member of the board wishes to make a comment on this?
In the proud tradition of Division 3, I want to be the one to move second and even third on this one. Let's get the money.
Okay. So we have a motion and at the appropriate time, we'll take that. Is there a second to that?
Second.
Okay, we have Ms. Anderson. And is there any member of the public that wishes to comment on this particular item? I'm seeing no hands up, so we will close the item and come back and do a roll call vote.
Director Oglesby,
Aye.
Director Edwards,
Aye.
Director Riley,
Aye.
Director Eisenhart,
Aye, yay, and hallelujah.
Director Paul,
Yes.
Vice Chair Anderson,
Yes.
Chair Adams.
Aye.
The motion
Thank
is
you all
adopted.
so much. Thank you very much, Joelle. And this is terrific. We can move forward, and we need to move forward quickly to ensure that we get.
Yeah, and we'll be back to you when and if FEMA is ready. The FEMA rep chose not to continue their trip all the way to Sleepy Hollow, so they didn't see it. There was some conversation, a little, oh my, you've already cleared the road. Oh my, you've already started to clear out the damage. As if taking care of your business can harm your ability to qualify for reimbursement. So we'll see how this goes.
Was our area covered in any of the drone footage?
No.
Did you get out that far? Okay, that's really been just eye-opening and really.
Yeah, so we're going to probably end up relying. So like the road, the rock falls, they've been cleared, but at least we've got photographic evidence. The muck in the building has been cleared, but you had to, otherwise,
you can't do anything.
Well, and mold and mildew.
Yeah,
and
damage.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay. Item 16 is to discuss preferred approach for development of district goals and objectives for 2023. Staff note's pretty clear. What we're looking for is just general direction, not action, on whether you want to continue to set goals and objectives on an annual basis and every other year basis, or some of the public organizations do a 5-year strategic plan, establish their working goals, and then update it every 5th year. If it is annual, would you like this year's to be facilitated, which would likely require a special meeting, or done internally, which could either be a special meeting or as a regular board meeting agenda item? And then if facilitated, do you have a short list in mind, and do you want to stay local, or do you want us to go with an RFQ? And then what would be your timeline? Last time we did facilitated, it was done, well, it got delayed due to COVID, and when we eventually did it, it happened in March in 2 sessions. Generally speaking, it needs to happen by April, so that if there's any initiative that affects the budget, it can be incorporated in the preliminary budget in May and the final budget in June. So that would be kind of a worst case timeline. And then I included for you kind of our history of planning sessions and what we did year in and year out, and then a sample list of facilitators. On that sample list, I can tell you that CSDA gave me a reference to Martin Rauch, and the district had used Martin for other things 15, 16 years ago. So his firm is still in business doing, they do public outreach for the city of Marina and Marina Coast Water District, and they've volunteered. So I would just say you could throw them on the sample list. This is not an exhaustive list, but it's just an example. And that is about all I have to offer you, but I do need to hear your discussion and get some direction.
So I see Amy and then George. Yes, Amy?
Yeah, our last one was not long ago at all, unless time flew much faster than I remember. Is that correct?
Right, it was just 2 years ago.
It was 2 years?
Well, we did the facilitated in 2021. And then last year we did a special meeting also via Zoom because of COVID in January. And you were presented with kind of an updated list that derived quite a bit from the prior year. And you just kind of talked it out and said, yeah, we need to really focus on these 3, but yeah, go ahead and include the other 3 or 4.
Time flies. I didn't realize it was that long ago, but it seemed to me that we did a very good job by ourselves, that we didn't have to take really, we knew the ones that were already on their way and were, we could bring forward the issues that we felt needed extra attention and kind of retire a couple of them, and that seemed to work well. I don't know that I would feel that a better job was done facilitated to do that every year.
Okay, thank you for your thoughts, George.
I recommend that we do kind of a true up process this year, based on the goals and objectives that were defined a year ago, but could do a true up and look at next year, maybe when we do a more serious and more extensive review of what our goals and objectives might be then, because I think this year we're going to see a number of legal decisions made. It's going to lay the groundwork for a lot of things that we're going to have to be doing. And I don't see the need to do an in-depth analysis of goals and objectives this year. But I do see that we may really need to do some deep thinking come next year.
Okay, thank you. Karen, how about you?
Well, that makes sense to me in terms of timing. So I think that's a good suggestion. But I do want, because we have 2 new board members this year, however we do it, I would just like to, make sure it's open to them and for them to give whatever input. Ask questions, give their point of view of the new members. So I don't want to take more time than necessary, but I want to take enough time that we really give our new board members a chance to be part of the process. I think I think we can do it without a facilitator, and there are pros and cons. You know, I think it seems easier and less time consuming and certainly less expensive to do it on our own. The downside I can see is that it requires Dave Stoll to kind of play a dual role of facilitator and our number one expert on everything. Oh, well, on a lot of things, with Dave Laredo being the expert on the legal things. So that's challenging. I would think that'd be challenging and quite a lot to expect of Dave Stoll. So, you know, I'm open to hearing how you feel about that, Dave.
Oh, I don't mind at all. I know that the city manager of Carmel is doing their facilitating for strategic goals on the 31st next week, and you know, we do that as well. I think that, you know, the model that I had done prior to Dr. Garcia facilitating was I would sit with each director separately and make a list of your near-term and long-term goals, and then see which ones overlapped each other. And so it was kind of a serial effort. But I think having you all talk to each other, and especially with two new directors, get to know each other a little bit, you know, we should do that. But that's my role. You guys pile it on. Go ahead.
Helvin, do you want to, or Karen, do you have something to
Oh,
follow
just
up?
I think I would like to do it as a special meeting of the board with just that on our agenda, and do it in person if possible.
Yeah. Okay. Edward, Alvin. Edward Alvin.
Thank you. I agree with Karen, but I really want to know what's going to take to get that Los Padres Dam report done. I hate to hear at mid-year review we need more money and we're not doing anything. Now that's supposed to came to us in December or November. What is going to take to get that done, and what else we got left on that last list that needs to be done and brought up?
I think that's what George was saying, that we should have like a truing up of exactly where do we stand on the items that were on the goals and objectives.
Well, I agree with that. And what does it take to get that Los Padres Dam report done? Or do we have to go in there without who we're waiting on and make a decision ourselves? So
okay, thank you. And now I'm going to see if I can hear from our let's see, Amy, did you already speak?
Just a quick comment on the new directors. Karen and I had to do this very early on when we first started on the board, and talking to the facilitator, asking me questions. I thought, what? I've been here a month and I couldn't say anything. I really needed to hear it from my, fellow board members, because there's so much to think about. And
so
my comment.
I'll give you what my thoughts are as well, and then we'll go hear from our two new members and see how they would like to do it. I agree. I think that we should do a true up. I think we should do it in person. I think we should find a place, an offsite place that's just local and not an expensive place. I feel though that we should have a facilitator so Dave can participate in another way, in a way that we're all like bonding together as our group, without his having to wear the two hats of facilitator and participant. And if we could just stay local and find someone who's simply a good meeting facilitator, I would prefer to do that. And so Mark and Ian, would you like to weigh in and just tell us, we're sitting here talking about you as if you are not even here. And the new people, what would the new people like? What would you like, new people?
Mayor Oglesby, why don't you go first?
yeah. Oh, thank you. I'll go. I'm new, but I'm not new to these issues.
Yeah.
I've been following the water management district for a while. I do think we need the true up. I like that concept because I think George is right. There's a lot of changes coming in the new year, and there's a lot of things that need to get settled. So no matter how you look at it, you're going to have to update your strategies when those things come through. And I am not a big proponent of having your executive director or city manager or that position facilitate. It's worth the money. And sometimes organizations, hey, we want to save money, let's just have this guy do it. Well, he shouldn't wear those two hats. He should be sitting back, answering questions, and we listen to him. The person we're going to have in charge actually do the day-to-day operations, sit next to us, so as Gary said, but not only bond with us, but actually see his thinking and his staff's thinking on what we need to do, other than we're telling him and he's writing it down. And so I think it's worth the money. And that's what I support, is the true up, and then schedule some type of facility, even though the true up can be facilitated. But I just want to be clear about the facilitation. I don't think you save money in that area.
Good. Thanks very much, Ian. Mark?
Thanks. I like everybody's comments on this. I am trending towards having a facilitator, just to get, for the reasons we've all talked about. I like the true ups. I call it accountability, really, right? Yeah. Let's figure out, what did we get there, and in that, I think I like that a lot. But I got to say, the most important thing is, guys, are we going to have bagels and schmear? And I don't want that bland lox. It's got to be the fatty, salty lox.
No Costco lox for you.
No Costco. It's got to be belly lox. It's got, loaded with salt, and then I'm good. I'm good for it. You got to have some
yogurt and granola.
No.
That's my kind of director.
We got bagels and schmear. I'll contribute. I'll see you there. So, but I know, but in that was only partly tongue in cheek.
No, I hear what you're saying.
But mostly, I think this could be a good thing. I really want to say also, Director Anderson, thank you for sharing about your, because I've been feeling what you described, right? People are asking me, so what are your aspirations for the district? And I'm sitting there going, want to stick a juicy fruit? I'm still trying to figure this out, and I so I really appreciated that. But it's no, this would be great.
Great. Well, Dave, I think you're hearing the consensus of the group pretty much. And then not where, but what kind of timeline should we be looking at now? You indicated we need to get this done well before April, in case there's any any cost issues that come out of what it is that we talk about.
Yeah, let me make sure I did hear it correctly.
Okay.
Because there were a number of folks who thought it should be facilitated.
Yes.
Do we want to go down that path with somebody locally or Northern California, so we're not flying in from Pasadena or what have you? Or
tell me, who would prefer not to have a facilitator?
Well, I'm just going to support a true up concept that it's in my mind. Dave's obviously familiar with all the issues that we're talking about. A true up to me is kind of a corrective action or slightly changing some things, but not substantive so much. And I think the substance is going to come a year from now or 8 months from now or something. And so I would prefer that if we go with the facilitator, go with somebody who's local, who's going to be pretty straightforward for our standpoint on process. And then it relieves Dave of trying to just manage the process as well as the substance.
Correct.
But I would go there. Maybe a year from now, we may want to do something more substantial.
Correct. Does everyone pretty much agree with that way of doing it? Not too expensive, local process.
I agree.
Okay, good. All right. So you've got that part down, Dave.
well, it sounds like the higher priorities are in-person, off-site special meeting. And then if there is a quality local person, because the number of complaints I've had from other organizations are, we hired a facilitator who knew nothing about us, and so it wasn't very effective, other than to take the the Sharpie and get on the easel and write things down and then label them and then bring them back and then sort them, which is all very important when you're kind of spitballing ideas. If you're just doing a true up, then maybe the ideas are mostly out there and you want to prioritize, darn it, this is our year for 1, 2, and 3, and let's not have 7 of them. It's these 3. Sure, you can have the other 4, but you better be working on these 3 and we need this done. And I know one of those for certain. I know what it is, and one of you requested an update on it at the next board meeting. So, we know that's going to be where are we at with Measure J, and everyone wants to know. And we're going to be putting an offer in, and you're going to have to face how to do a hearing of public necessity, and that's going to be huge. That's going to be
Okay.
a very huge undertaking.
So we're getting off the subject.
Yep.
You're saying exactly what we ought to be doing, and that's exactly what we will do. So does everyone agree face to face? Is there anyone who does not want face to face? Okay, face to face.
Well, we might as well get ready for February. We're gonna
Okay.
start having face to face. I know Tom Rowley out there. He can start coming back.
Well, let's hope that we can get this done in February, face to face. And do we want it at someone's home or at a hotel or a cinema or something like that? Just a one day, maybe even, like a long afternoon or something.
Seminar is a good idea.
Yeah.
That's quiet. There's parking.
Yeah, there's also a decent room in Casa Munris in Monterey. The key is right size space, but if you had a stray member of the public who came, it's got to still be posted as an open meeting. That it works without making you feel uncomfortable. I know when I was on school board, we posted an open public meeting on the sun deck of one of our board members. And a member of the public came, and it was a very uncomfortable 3-hour session.
Wow.
Well, then maybe we should have it someplace down in South County.
Oh, my God.
I just, my kind of condition, at least from my standpoint, I don't think Dave should be asked to educate the facilitator on the issues. And that's where I draw a line. I think I draw a line about, is a facilitator really that necessary if we're going to mainly just talk substance and kind of fine tune some of the aspects or prioritize slightly differently? But it seems to me the agenda would be pretty well established from the prior goals and the foreseeable future, in the near term. And then based on what happens next year, we ought to have a full bore retreat on goals and objectives.
But the facilitator's job is really to make sure that everybody has an opportunity to talk and that not, any one person does most of the talking, or they're there to draw out and get the feeling of everybody and make sure that there's an opportunity for everyone to ask the questions they need to ask and get heard. Isn't that what they're for?
Yeah, somebody.
Yeah,
yes.
you may recall last time you also took a stab at the mission, vision, and values. And so there was a need for Dr. Garcia to kind of say, well, what's the subtle difference between them? What's the nuance?
Yeah, I don't think we want to go there again.
Right. So we don't go there. And then the other piece of the education was you set goals, but you must have deliverables and objectives, which are either measurable or executable. A goal without an objective is unattainable. I mean, so he spent time talking about the difference between a goal and an objective. And the important thing was actually setting objectives that were then measurable or reviewable to see if you actually went down the path you said you wanted to go. And I think you've been educated as to that. Obviously we review it, but what you're trying to come out with are executables that will lead to success against the goals that you're going to put out there. And so we can certainly go back over, the what are we trying to accomplish in the setting. But I think you have been recently enough, apart except for Mark and Ian. And Ian, of course, you do this all the time. You've got how many different boards and appointments, and your own city council. So
okay, so I'm going to pose right back in because Ian and I have now been sitting in meetings for almost 5 hours. So, and let's do this. We've decided it's going to be face to face. It's going to be someplace off-site, maybe a Sillamar, maybe Casa Munris. We're going to, depending on the cost, we're going to have somebody local who's going to do it, and we're going to try to get it done in February. And then I think, Dave, we can work out the specifics about exactly how and who we want it to go. I've been thinking about maybe 1 or 2 other people that we could put on the list, just individuals that would be able to, somebody who might already have some knowledge about what it is that we're talking about. Even a local person who simply reads the newspaper would be able to handle a lot of what it is that, we're talking about here.
Well, and you're absolutely right. And a lot of it is just to make sure everyone is heard and no one's dominant, and that things get organized. So
yeah. So I think maybe if anyone has additional thoughts that they would like to throw in, especially about who might do a good job, why don't we stay in touch, probably through Dave, or maybe even just give the names to Joelle, who could get them to Dave, and we can, or talk among ourselves. If we can talk among ourselves if we aren't making decisions. Just if we're just brainstorming additional information, we would be able to do that under the Brown Act. But I feel like we've got enough to go on. Do you, Dave? You okay with
Oh,
all
absolutely.
this? All right, good. Okay, great. Okay, so I think we've got that settled. We don't need a motion. The next item that we have on our agenda is simply the informational items and the staff reports that you can read for yourself. And I will ask if there's any other order for the, any other business for the good of the order at this point. Before I move, Alan's talking, but I'm glad to see.
Yeah, I'm sorry. When we're going to make that mention of going back to a hybrid meeting?
Yep.
Starting in February, I think some people would like to know.
Yeah, no, I'm very glad you asked.
Thank you.
It's looking like we will not be able to go hybrid in February. Not all the technology has arrived and been installed. And so we need to have a shakedown period, and February meeting scheduled for the 13th, which is really just 3 weeks. So we think that it's more prone for disaster than success at this point.
So,
okay.
So who's in charge of that?
Yeah, well, Joelle's been doing a very good job, but you've got Devira.
Just playing with him. Just playing with him.
Yeah, no, we're even nervous about having our staff meeting on Friday because there's still a table full of technology just sitting out in the middle of the room. So, but
right,
they seem to be close.
Keep working at it.
You'll let us know.
So Dave, then are we going to be face to face, or are we in February? Are we going to be on Zoom?
I think it's going to be Zoom. Joelle, isn't it?
Right. The board meeting in February will be done via Zoom.
Okay.
And it's really the last chance we have under the governor's order. So
yeah.
But we still have committee meetings on Zoom and regular meetings in person.
That's the marching orders you gave, but I think we're going to have to start heading back to in-person committee meetings soon. It's unfortunate, but as I mentioned before, the rules in the Senate bill were very much making it harder for you as directors to not show up at meetings.
Mm-hmm.
So it's less about the public and more about the electeds or appointeds. So we're kind of back to,
the old
Brown
days
Act and the old days. Yeah.
Joelle will let us know exactly where each meeting is so we know where to show up.
Yeah.
when the resources are available.
And keep in mind, our only true Brown Act committee is the Finance and Administration Committee. So it is possible that you could set a board policy to extend Zoom meetings for the other committees if you so choose. So that's something you should just be thinking about for right now.
Good.
I'm
Okay.
sorry, one more
Yes,
question.
and,
Can we just confirm who are we going to send our suggestions as far as facilitator? Let's just pick one person now so we're not scattering them around.
No, send it to Joelle.
Okay. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you all so much. And we'll see you, if not before, we'll see you on February 13th. And my hope is that we will be able to have our meeting, our retreat, and whatever we want to call it, before the end of February. So thank you. And with that, I will call this meeting adjourned.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank
Good
you.
meeting.